I'm Jason. I help run Padre Communications with Nikki. I used to be a journalist. I did various journalisty things, but probably the most relevant for today is that I ran a website called CNET for 8 years in the UK. It's the world's biggest technology website. And we've ended up doing quite a lot of work helping clients with websites. We've built some, we've helped maintain some. And obviously SEO is quite a big part of that. We've had to keep abreast of all the latest developments so that we can advise our clients on the best place to spend their time and money. And so I thought I'd talk about the latest stuff today. Right, let me just share my screen. Google is always tweaking its algorithm for the way in which it decides which pages appear where in its search results. Several times a month it makes changes and mostly doesn't say very much about them publicly. And unless the traffic to your site is affected some way, maybe it might go through the roof or collapse, or maybe you're a professional SEO person, you probably won't notice and you don't really need to. But sometimes Google makes some changes that it wants people to know about so that they can make the changes that are needed to their site. And that's one of the changes I want to talk about today, which is all about what Google calls the page experience. And this is essentially how fast a page appears to load from the user's perspective and how quickly you can start interacting with that page. It's been pushed back because of COVID, but it's the changes to the algorithm are coming in mid-June and will roll through towards the end of August. That's the plan. They'll do it in phases to see if there are any unintended consequences from their side. It's really important what Google says, because for many people, Google is the gatekeeper to the internet. If you are on the first page of Google for your goods or services, it means big business normally. And that means that if Google is going to reward you for doing certain things, then you're probably going to do them. So for some time, Google has looked at various things, such as whether a site is mobile friendly. Does it have any malware or nasty things on there? Is the page delivered over a secure connection? Are there any annoying interstitials, which are like those ads that you used to get? Remember when you used to click a link and instead of going to what you wanted, you got a full page and you have to watch this thing before going any further. You don't see many of those ads anymore. They're still around, but there are less of them. And most websites now have a half decent mobile version of it. And most of them are secure connections. You know, what Google has asked you to do, everyone to do, that's kind of worked. It's worth saying why page speed is important, I think. There are lots of studies that show that the faster a web page loads, the more time users spend on it, and the more likely they are to contact you or buy something from you. So for example, the BBC found that it lost 10% of its users for every additional second their site took to load. And the retailer Furniture Vintage, they managed to reduce the time it took for its site to load by about 20%. And they saw a 10% increase in conversion rates on mobiles, which is basically a lot of money. So a fast page is a good thing, but what makes a fast page? There are lots of ways you can measure it, but Google has made it easier for you to focus your attention on certain things by coming up with a set of measurements it calls Core Web Vitals. And as with many internet things, this sounds complicated, but it isn't really, trust me. We'll try some alphabet soup first as to what Core Web Vitals means. There's LCP, there's FID, and there's CLS. There we go, that's explained everything, I think. Maybe not. We'll try the word salad version. Largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift. My job's done. If you're still scratching your head, which I was when I first came across this, I'll explain each one of those in turn. So largest contentful paint. This is basically how long does it take for the biggest bit of content to appear? So that could be text, it could be more likely though it's an image or a video. It's not how long it takes for the entire page to load, it's just how long does the most important bits of it take to load? And Google considers under 2.5 seconds to be good, somewhere between 2.5 seconds to 4 seconds to be needing improvement, and over that to be poor. That's LCP. FID, first input delay. That's basically how long does it take for the site to react to the first interaction? So Does the site do anything when you tap it? If the page looks like it's loaded and nothing's happening, then that's quite a frustrating experience. So it considers good here to be under 100 milliseconds, which is essentially immediately. And only over 300 milliseconds is poor. So that can be quite a tough one to reach. And the last one is probably in some ways the most important, I think, for users, is cumulative layout shift. And that basically means, does the page move around while it's loading? If this has ever happened to you, it's certainly happened to me a lot when you look at something on your mobile and you'll go to click something, and just at the last second before your finger gets there, it moves. So this is an example of what they're trying to stop happening. This is a pretend website. You're maybe thinking about buying something, you've got 14 items ready to confirm, and you're about to press no, go back, and an ad or something loads at the last second just above where the button is, and it pushes everything down. And in this case, it means you click yes, place my order, instead of no, go back. And of course, you're going no, go back, and it doesn't make a difference. That is what they're trying to avoid. As you probably gather, most of these metrics are kind of focused on mobile devices, where a slow loading image or a site that doesn't do anything when you tap it or moves around when you tap is particularly frustrating. So if you remember the chart from earlier, it's basically taken all the things that it's looked at for years and it's added these signals in above. So largest contentful paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift. And it takes all of these signals and it kind of feeds into its overall score, if you like, for the page experience. There are thought to be about 200 signals that Google uses to determine every single search result. So you probably shouldn't get too caught up with these things at the expense of, say, great content. But nevertheless, they're still important to bear in mind. That's the theory. So how do you know how well a website is doing? Well, there is a tool called the Page Speed Insights tool, which is at this URL. We'll send it around afterwards. And what it does is you can put any URL at all into the bar at the top and press Analyze, and it will give you a report and a score. So this is the score for The Guardian on mobile, 39, not particularly great. If you're a popular website, you'll get a load of stuff here where it says field data. And this is basically taken from Google looking at Chrome users and what happened when they looked at the pages. So actually, although this score isn't great, there's quite a lot of green here, so it's probably not as bad as it looks. And then all the way down here, it's giving you the indications for the different fields we've talked about. And then you get a great big list of all the stuff you could do to make your site faster in sort of varying degrees of complication. I thought it'd be worth looking at a couple of others just to sort of show that actually even the big brands don't get this right all the time. This is the BBC. They're only 60. So there's still some work that they could do. They seem to have a particular problem with cumulative layout shift. So basically something's loading in right at the last second that changes the way the page works. And even Amazon, the mighty Amazon, is only getting 76. So there's still some stuff they can do there. That's one place you can look, and you can put any website into that and see what it says. But there's also the Google Search Console, which if you're not familiar with it, it's probably the one thing that you should spend some time with because it's free. And it's actually a really good tool, and it contains loads and loads of information about how Google sees your website. If there's any errors in there, they'll show up. If there's any suggestions for coding improvements, you'll be able to see how much traffic you're getting in quite a simple way. So you don't have to kind of dig through pages and pages of Google Analytics. And it's just a great one to look at. There's a new little bit here that says Core Web Vitals. And you'll get a graph like this, and it's sort of showing you how many URLs need improvement in Google's opinion, how many are bad, how many are good. And then they've got another one called Page Experience. So that's rolling all this stuff together. It's giving you a score. So they get looking at the Core Web Vitals here, how many URLs you've got that fail that in some way, how easy it considers your site to be to use on a mobile, whether there's any security problems, which really shouldn't be. That's probably the most important thing you'd have to fix if that was a problem. And is it secured? Is it delivered over a secure connection? That's what HTTPS means. And you get this graph, and you can dig into the different things and have a bit of a look around. In terms of what you can do with the information that you get out of all the various tools, I think probably the most practical thing to do is just look for something that you might be able to do yourself pretty easily. And the thing that normally falls into that is images. A normal website will have some images that are just too big, or they're not compressed enough, or they're using an old inefficient file format. And just sorting those out on some key pages like your home page and your main services and so on, that would be, a few hours well spent. There are different ways you can compress an image. This might be a bit hard to see in any great detail over Zoom, but this is basically a slide that looks at the same picture delivered in 3 slightly different ways. One is the original JPEG of the dog, and that comes to 824 kilobytes. The one in the middle is using lossy compressions. That means you're saving it and you're removing some of the information. So on my screen, it may not come through, the background is a bit blocky, and some of these edges of the dog are a little bit jagged. But depending on what size it is and what you're trying to do with it, that might be fine. And you're certainly saving a lot of space. So 76K is a lot less than 124K, so it will load a lot faster. And you can go all the way up to 80% compression, which is even smaller. But again, the picture really starts to break up now. The sort of background has got lots and lots of blocky bits on. It's starting to look less like a dog with hair and more just sort of like a vague impression of something. But if it was used very small, that might be absolutely fine. There's also another file format. So JPEG's been around forever and ever and ever. A newer one is called WebP, which most browsers now support. This slide shows the same picture. On the left is a JPEG version of the picture, which is over 3 meg, which is enormous for a website, really. And then on the right is the same picture delivered in the WebP format. It looks exactly the same. The quality is identical, but the file size is more than half. So that's a huge deal. So images, depending on how comfortable you are with this sort of thing, it may be something you can do yourself, or at least kind of make a start with. The other thing you'll see a lot of will be things called render blocking resources. So this is normally a load of JavaScript code that is being loaded to make the page do something. So maybe it's a contact form or Google Analytics. So what you can do is you can change whereabouts those scripts are loaded. So they may still be loaded, but maybe further down the sort of list of things to load. That can improve your site speed quite significantly. But when you start moving stuff around like that, it does actually get quite complicated, and you can accidentally break stuff that isn't immediately obvious because there may be something that needs that code to be loaded where it is. So I think probably when you get into that, it's probably easier to just get a professional to do it for you. But if you feel of interest, then go for it. But I think the kind of key takeaway really from this is that all of this is good stuff to do anyway. So even if Google hadn't brought out this sort of system to mark your homework, well, web pages should be fast to load. They should be free of nasty malware. You should be able to type a credit card number and an address in there, and someone doesn't steal it. Web pages should do something when you tap them. They shouldn't just sit there going, oh, I don't know, and they shouldn't move all over the place. So it's really an excuse to kind of implement best practices really for your website. So if you've been thinking, oh, I maybe need to look at it and see what I can do to improve things, just use this as an excuse to make these sorts of changes, and you'll end up feeling like these people in these shots that I found, happy and phone. That's what I typed in to look for, and I thought they were so amusing I had to stick them in. That's it. Hopefully that all made sense. I was trying to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour through lots and lots of different things as quickly as possible. But if anyone's got any questions, happy to take them.